Listen,
How are you doing?
I'm well in yourself.
Good, good. Thank you so much for making the time.
No, thanks for inviting.
I know you could have been half across the world, traveling and doing cool things, but you made the time to join us today.
No, as always, it's a pleasure, and it's always good to see you, Stan, with your very hard questions. And
Hey, talking about hard questions, I called you here for concepts I cannot put my mind around. This is episode 4 of the 5-part series with Tyrisha Center, a paper series that you edited. But this particular set of papers, man, they kept me up at night. They kept me up at night. But before we get into the meat of it, who's TK? Where are you from?
Me, I'm just a person there from the dusty streets of Everton here in Gauteng. Tivas, so way. Home Everton.
Okay.
Obviously, with my 2 parents, lovely parents, TK Pooe. I think, essentially very blessed to have been born by them. They put up with a lot. Apparently, I'm a very hard individual. That's what they say. Hence, they even were very happy that I married and left them. I'm like, am I not loved? I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah. So look, I always said, look, I'm just someone who's actually just very curious about life. I've been exceptionally blessed that this curiousness has turned into a job. That I always say, I'm a professional speaker and somebody who gets paid to be curious. In the form of I do university work. Currently at the African School of Governance in Rwanda, Kigali, where I'm a professor of statecraft and foresight. It's a fancy term for saying they hired me and they're like, we like you, but we'll find something for you to do here so that you can be a curious individual. And look, that's always been for me my great MO is that I'm just curious about life. I've been essentially blessed to be able to have lived it. The good Lord has been good towards me in terms of the types of profession. I started in government. I was at local government at Citibank District Municipality, and then went to the Gauteng Provincial Legislature as a researcher and a consultant. And I've just always been around public policy. I think I'm very curious about key questions about why do other places do well and not us? And that for me has always been a burning question. Yeah, from as young as I can remember, that if one reads the Bible, you always see that, look, God blesses us equally. We are all God's children in a way. And when I read the Bible, as provided you stick to it, he blesses you. So I always ask, why not us? And the question always burns for me to say, look, we've got a wonderful country. I'll never deny South Africa. For me, it's epitome where it's a blessed country in terms of the human capital. People are nice. There might be questions, but we are nice sometimes. And just the infrastructure. And I think, obviously, you and I are of a generation where we moved past 1994. And once you are, I think, part of a privileged generation that has been able to say we can dream a bit bigger than what our parents did, there is a key question of saying, what then do we leave behind for our kids? And that's what, for me, is my passion. If you ask me, what do I love? It's those key questions of saying, listen, how now do you take the blessing which you've been given post-1994 in the form that I can go study? I haven't gone to UKZN, haven't been able to get degrees. They're wonderful for themselves and for society, but it's a key question of saying, how now do you translate that into a situation where I believe South Africa and even the continent should be in a direction that as we head towards the 22nd century, it should be our century. It should be us who are designing the new solutions because we need them the most. It should be us when you speak about health, when you speak about AI, finance, and tech. It should be us who are dominating those fields because we need them a bit more. And my work is essentially around that. How do you take what we need a bit more, translate that into government, put that into education such that the next generation, the struggle should be, how do we use South Africa and how do we build a continent from a position where we've got surplus? How do we now become the builders and the architect of the 22nd century of Africa. And I think South Africa should be leading that.
Yeah.
I never hide it. I'm one of those I'm a nationalist at the core of it, much to my former bosses,
Yeah.
Geshi. I'm a nationalist, and I believe South Africa should be leading that conversation.
And what is it about the environment that you grew up in, Everton, that brought this fire in you, this yearn to keep learning, to be curious, and to do so many great things that you have done already?
It's the fear of my mother and father. I think fear, what do they say? Fear is the beginning of all wisdom.
Of all wisdom.
So it was a fear. And look, I always say, look, the lovely thing is when you come from my father's Tswana and my mother is Zulu. So I always say, look, when you're in those situations and especially that period of the transition of there's always a question of who and what are you and what's going to happen to you. My parents were always very encouraging of it, to the fact that, look, go for it. And look, as my wife always laughs, you can clearly hear I'm a person who went to those types of school. And when you are that generation that goes to those types of school and it's only you and a few others, those questions become a bit more. And it's a key question of I think when you come from I'm a believer, if you come from a mum and a father and you go to those institutions and now people are a bit like, okay, look, they're racist. We cannot lie. Some of them are outright racist, but some of them are very much...
Very nice.
They're very nice. But it does get a question of saying you have to be aware of your history.
Yeah.
So when you're in those institutions, history becomes important. But I would say this apart from the parents, they were big on reading.
Yeah.
Had those green encyclopedia books, which people no longer have.
Hey.
And they were like, no, look, if you're bored, go read. Yeah. So that's where I learned African history, world history. I love history as a subject, geography. But I would say one of the big turning points politically about consciousness was I lived in Australia. I got the chance to go live in Australia. And, one of the Australians would always ask, I don't understand you guys. How did you guys simply just forgive white people? Because he says, if it was us, we would have done something else. You have to understand the history of Australia to understand the contradiction of a white Australian person saying that. And it really got me thinking. And that's when I think, look, I took my reading a bit deeper. You start to read more about Robert Sobukwe, you start to read a bit more about Pan-Africanism, the Black consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think it forms you. Yeah. And then when you go to a place like KZN, the first thing is you get the Ubani, and they're like, and they're always asking, like, but I'm here, no Ubani. And they're big on this Ubani thing. And I'm like, this is it. So it's a question.
They're asking you to say it's Tagazen.
Yeah, they're asking this one thing, and I'm like, okay, no, it's fine. So I think it's a time and a process where questions get asked, and questions deserve answers. And I'm blessed that my parents were able to assist me. Look, my faith has been also very big in that. Being a Christian also puts you in a particular angle of understanding life and society. But all of it comes down to society will always ask questions. That's a question. What are the answers that you give? And when I say I'm a professional person who's curious, it just so helps to think about it. I always say it's the weirdest thing. I literally get paid to read books, read articles, and to answer these questions of who are you, where does the state go? It's different for everyone. Some people, yourself, might be tech and ICT and commerce, but it's a key question. If you come from a developing country like South Africa, if you come from in the Val, and I always say, because I try to also go back home to assist, to say, look, what does that mean to say that you have been privileged? But when I go back home to Everton, it's not the same for everyone. Some of the people I grew up with have not had the same privileges. It's not that one is smarter or not. It was simply timing and chance, timing and blessings. But the thing is, I always say, I want people, if you come from the Val, if you come from Everton, it should be a situation that in the future, especially if you're an African person, fail because you're bad.
Yeah.
Let's not say you failed because the system failed you, whether it's racism, whether it's a question of you didn't have the right finances. And that's always what I think when coming from the Val is a big thing. And if you speak to people from the Val, we all kind of have the same thing, because it's probably one of the last places where the Pan-African Congress of Azania still exists. So it's always the big question of how do we create a society that if you're going to be an African and a Black person, fail because you're not good. Don't fail because the system is failing you. So that's kind of what drives me, and that's what it means to come from the Val, I think. Yeah,
the Val is one of my favorite places. I myself went to VUT, so
that place.
The Val has a special place in my heart. It's a place that I'll never forget. It's done wonderful things for me. So I know the spirit of the Val as you speak about it. So you've traveled the world. You've been a fellow in Germany. You are now in Kigali. You've been in many other places. You've consulted in private. You've worked in government. You've been in academia. How is South Africa faring about in comparison to the rest of the world, in terms of the culture that we have just as people, to how our government is progressing, to even the private sector, how we're moving? And I ask this because of the analogy just made of the Australian guy saying to you, it seems like you guys are took the apartheid thing quite easily, just brushed it off. And when you look at people or nationals that have been through such traumas, it almost makes a part of their identity. But the language that we have in South Africa is forget about it. It happened. We get it. Let's move on. And when you look at other countries, Rwanda, for example, their 94 moment is a part of their identity. They always refer back to it to say, look, guys, if we don't know where we come from, it's going to be very difficult to determine where we are going. As such, we might end up very much where we began. So how are we faring about as a country?
No, that's a brilliant question. Look, I think we are. I'll answer it in this way, and I think it's not a secret. I think we're not. The ambition of the people at where we'd like to be and where we are, two different worlds apart, right? And I think it comes from, like you said, the decisions we've made in 1994. There's obviously, as I said, I'm a big, I love Robert Sobukwe, and I love the PAC and what they did, which would obviously then run juxtaposed to the African National Congress.
Right.
And one might say the purveyor of this would be someone like former President Nelson Mandela. The question of, look, do we just move on? And it's a hard one, because what I love about Rwanda is Rwanda uses, what they've done well is they've used their history and their moment of hurt to build the country. South Africa, we've taken, we build it in moments and parts. We have this thing called a rainbow nation. Okay, it's great for marketing. You can, I would even say it's equivalent to the American dream. It doesn't really mean anything, but it means something when you need it to.
Yeah.
And then what we then do is we kind of put it into certain places. We put it into sports.
Yeah.
Springboks do well, South Africa does well. Bafana does well. We're okay. You know, we can survive. Which really raises the question: did we the decisions and the trade-offs which were made? When I was a bit younger, look, I think like most young people, you start to say, "Hey, this Madiba guy sold us down the river." But then, as you go to Rwanda, I think we were similar in this. We made a decision.
Yeah.
Which is to say, our past is our past. But I think what we did differently is Rwanda used that as steam to say, there's a point of reference of what never again must look like. And everything we do as an intentionality in what they do in Rwanda is, when you're hiring minister, when you're building an education system, the reference point is building it from 1994. South Africa, we've never really, we've moved, but we don't quite know what that means. Right? Because you say, okay, in one moment you say, look, we want to be great. But I always say, imagine how much our sports teams in the Springboks would do better if they're not the ones who are expected to carry the position of South Africa. Because that's a political and a leadership position. So I think we've taken the point of 1994, but we've put it in the wrong places. We've taken that capital and put it in the wrong places. We should have put it into education and we should have put it into the economy. For instance, South Africa, we asked, how's our private sector? South Africa's private sector is a monster.
Yeah.
Living in East Africa, MTN is a monster of a company. And you ask yourself that we know them here because we're familiar with them.
Yeah.
But when you go to other countries and you see your own brand and you're like, it's not just there. You know, it's not like, oh no, we're competing. No, it is huge. And then you ask yourself, if we can do that with a company like that, why can't we do it back home with our education system where it should be, I believe, there should be a certain level of common norms which we all should subscribe to, which is to say education should not be a pocket issue. Whether I go to St. John's or my former school, General Smarts High School, it should be differences. Like, no, I'm simply going to a St. John's or this type of school because I'm as a Christian, I want my kids to have that background. Not because, oh my word, there's such a difference between a public and a private school. So which says to me, we've not invested properly. Because what I would have expected from our government would have been, you guys who come from this background, what does an education system look like? Well, it should be world class. We can't compromise on that, because you know what it's like to not be world class. And the contradiction is, a lot of our former struggle heroes were people who, like the founder of the ANC, Pixie Sekakeb, studied at Oxford. Before Oxford, he was at Obama's Columbia University. Won awards. So clearly, it's not an intellectual. We do not lack intellectually as Black people. But then the question comes, how then can you have a government that would still be comfortable in saying that our rural schools and our township schools are not world-class? In Rwanda, they viewed it as education should be world-class, period. Because when you have a world-class education system and you're creating world-class citizens from positions of trauma, you create world-class captains of industry. And captains of industry who are world class. Because thinking in Rwanda is always about 1994. When they say never again, it's never again will we be backwards in that thinking. It's not the case in South Africa. Unfortunately, where you go to school, that still determine your outcome. And that says to me, why did you not invest in that? And then it's a key question of where you come from in infrastructure. As I said, I come from the Vaal. The Vaal infrastructure wise is just in, like most of Gauteng, it's degradation. And then you ask yourself, but if you're a politician, you drive on the same roads as I do.
Yep.
Maybe your car doesn't hit the pothole because your drivers have the ability to put blue lights on.
Yeah.
But it's a key question of saying, how are you comfortable? Because a lot of these politicians will pop up during funerals. Like, how are you comfortable visiting poverty and then you say you leave it? In Rwanda, the key thing about 1994 is all of us. I think we were speaking earlier on that maybe the issue was, in 1994 for Rwanda, there's much like South Africa, the state was broke.
Yes.
What they used to pay the Rwandan civil servants was they used to pay them in food. So when they're building, it's always a key question of we are building. So when the first salary started to come, it's a key question of Rwanda. So maybe the key question of saying, when our politicians were going in and inherited from the Apartheid government, how did they actually view the idea of payment and of sacrifice? Because as a famous former politician of the ANC, Smasin Gwanyama, used to say, apparently they didn't go in the struggle to be poor.
Oh,
yeah, it's documented. It's a public record. I'm not saying anything which is not been recorded, and maybe that gives insight into their personality. That it was maybe not about us, and it was about them. And the key difference would be, to answer the key question of maybe what differs 1994 in Rwanda and 1994 in South Africa. And this is, by the way, not all. There are brilliant politicians in South Africa who it's a driving force to be better. But I would say, if you were to say as a mainstream, from the experiences I've had, the mainstream Rwandan politician, when they speak about 1994, they say, never again shall we ever go back to that. So we need to be better. So when you're hired, when you're voted in, when you're working for the state, your point of reference is that 1994. I don't think in South Africa 1994 drives us and fuels us to the point where it should be. If we're saying hospitals don't work, I've been to meetings in Rwanda where you see the president, ministers get fired in the day for simply not greeting a simple security guard, because the belief is, who are you that you believe you've arrived? I mean, you have a blue light. One of the biggest shocks we had, because we had the privilege at the African School of Governance, we hosted she's my favorite, Reserve Bank Governor Soraya from Rwanda. Yeah. So you go out, you meet her. This lady came in her own car. She opened her own door. And I was like, let me think, how does that work in South Africa?
Yeah.
And then I was shocked. So
with bodyguards.
Bodyguards. And so also my random friends could pick up, why are you shocked? And they're like, oh no, even the driver, she pays for it. Because there's a belief that if you want to drive yourself, and you want as a government official, if you don't want to drive yourself, that payment of the driver should come from you. Why must the state pay for you to do that? Because the key point again is we're the same. We're all trying to build, so why must you be different? So you see sometimes ministers and you bump into them in Rwanda and like, oh, who's this person? And you speak to them like, this is a very smart person. And they say, oh no, this is a minister of something and something. And I'm like, a minister, like by themselves walking.
Just randomly with the people.
And they look at you like, but they're serving us. And you start to think that, it's more like the other way. We're serving them. They're not serving us.
Yes.
So again, to maybe wrap it up there, to say that moment in 1994 is special, but I don't think it has fueled what this country should be, because there's still Rwanda is very clear on what it wants to be. It wants to be world class. Hence, you can have Visit Rwanda with PSG, with Arsenal, because they believe they must overshoot. There does need to be a question of saying, what does 1994 mean? And maybe the older generation, and I remember having this discussion with my wife, it's a key question of, in their minds, maybe they believe post 94 they had arrived. It was it.
That's it.
That's it. It was just to say, look, we got rid of formal apartheid legislatively. But there's never been a key question of what does it now mean to build for the future? Hence, we struggle with an NDP, which was started in 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
And by 2030, we were supposed to be somewhere.
Well,
it's only 4 years from 2030, and we're not going to meet it. It's not a secret.
Yeah.
But so I think maybe the key difference would be 1994 in Rwanda is their feel for what 100 years will look like. From hence, they even have Vision 2050.
Yeah.
All the ministers speak about Vision 2050. The church I go to in Rwanda, even the priests are expected to say, hey, where does your church fit into Vision 2050?
Wow.
Now, that's to the level of a
church.
Even a no, there's no one who is sacred there. The church needs to say, NGOs need to say. Hence, they have no issues in getting rid of. If you're not in service of this vision for the country, what are you doing in the country? In South Africa, what's there is no vision for South Africa. As I said, we've got a brilliant private sector.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's a bit oligopolist, which is to say it's too concentrated.
Yeah.
It does need to be broken apart. But you don't just break it for the sake of breaking it, to say, listen, we need you guys to be able to go get these new level of entrepreneurs that are coming out so that you guys can fund them easier than we could. So it must be in service of something. And unless you have that overarching vision, it doesn't go there. So vision, I think, is what really separates the 1994 minutes. A country with a vision, and the vision runs to 50 to 100 years. A country which, and you start to see it now, because 1994 seems to be the full stop, everything then centers around there. And you can have books and PhDs on 1994, but you're not having PhDs and discussions about what happens post.
Right.
And then there's this thing, you start to navel gaze. And South Africans were brilliant at navel gazing, whereas, look, negatively people get shocked that why would you leave a place like Wits and Joburg? And some people are like, why would you leave and go? And they say things, you go to Africa. And I'm like, but we're all here. And I'm like, look, it's a key question of, and you'd know best, especially coming from your field, that East Africa is on the move. And this other thing is, when you land, whether it's you're in Kenya, even Rwanda, you feel that there's a difference.
Yeah.
And all those countries are, look, not perfect, by the way, but they're all about how do we now get to the future. There's an obsession with it.
About the future.
About the future and making sure that they've got a stake in it. South Africa, when you land here, and you feel it. The thing is, I always tell people, my belief is, as a futurist, is if I want to see where a country is going, I go to the airport. Or our Tambo is old, or our Tambo is dilapidated, or our Tambo is not a representation of the future. No. It's stuck in 2010 because that's the last big infrastructural development I think that came from it. Sometimes you go to OR and you see wires hanging out and you're like, how can this be? It says a lot about South Africa.
It does. Right? It does.
Just suppose that Addis is just going on a different path.
Right.
They're building a new airport. Rwanda has stated that they're now building their new airport. And when you look at the designs, it's speaking to the future.
Yeah.
So I would say 1994, if you want to understand the key differences, look at the airports. OR Tambo seems to be, we believe it was a full stop to our development. We don't know what comes next. You visit Addis, you visit Kigali, you even visit other places which are even more a bit controversial, like Morocco.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. There's a hunger for the future, and I think we've not used our 1994 moment well.
How did Rwanda get it right? And I ask in this sense. They had their 94 moment, and they made sure that people in Rwanda do not forget about this moment. How did they get that right? The fact that everyone should understand what happened. Even generations that come after should not forget what happened in order to determine what's good for the country. Now, back to South Africa. We had our moment, but we are very soft about it. We are very easy to move past it. And in terms of identity, in terms of our NDP, in terms of many, many other things, we seem to be all over the place. Could be the identity of a rainbow nation, maybe. But how did they get it right? And onto that, how can we learn from that and get our 94 moment right? What would be a blueprint to follow?
Well, more directly, it's leadership.
Yeah.
We can't get away from it. And look, there were offshoots, right? Post-president, and I always say President Nelson Mandela is a moment in time. I think sometimes when you leave South Africa, you better understand when he is a moment in time. There's this lady, a friend of mine, Jocelyn, she always explains that, look, for you guys, President Nelson Mandela, and by the way, the content has immense respect for the old man. So they'll say, look, you guys have President Nelson Mandela. Then she says, look, for us, he's President Kagame is more. And I was like, what do you mean? Because when you're like, we're South African. She says, look, you guys were fighting from a position of being at home.
Yes.
That's what apartheid is. We wanted home to come back. Remember, during the lead up to the genocide, many of the generation of leadership in Rwanda grew up outside Rwanda. So she was explaining to me of her parents' generation that when they look and they revere President Kagame, it's an issue. He says, TK, that man gave us our home. He gave us back. We were able to come back into Rwanda. And then it got me thinking to say, so it will always be a bit different.
Yeah.
The question that they came back into something and they must build.
Yes.
So maybe it's a key question we should ask is, those of our leaders who were in exile, what necessarily were they thinking about? It's a key question. The one thing I do know on good authority, even literature, is the one person who seems to embody that type of thing was President Ora Tambo.
Okay.
You speak to people, you read books, and his key issue was always reminding the comrades was guys who were going back home to build. But I think his death, obviously, untimely at the time, kind of created a bit of a schism, right? You speak about our softness of 1994. Look, the history of Rwanda and the museums and the books do not lie. There was a genocide. People killed themselves. There's even a whole genocide museum. I know we have an apartheid museum, but it's an issue of saying you need to be clear in the books to say that, listen, we were colonized 300 years ago by white people and Europeans. It's not a lie. It's a truth. It's just a plain blanket truth. Land was taken away. After the British came the Afrikaner nationalists within the form of apartheid. In our books, very soft on that. So if you're soft on telling the truth, how then do you correct lies?
Are we telling the story?
Telling the story. I think the curriculum development on history is still coming up, but you're doing it in a moment in time where leadership has lost legitimacy.
Eish.
And look, you now have people, and we have to be very clear, not every white person,
of course.
People such as Freedom Front Plus, who now will question history, like, no, was it really apartheid? I mean, and you're like, you're going back
do we need to educate you?
Do we need to? But it goes back to, where was the leadership? We should have taken a harder decision to say every South African, and Rwanda, black or white. Remember, they don't do the Hutsi and Tutsi thing anymore. It's your Rwandan.
Yeah.
So it should have been an issue. Being South African, you will know the history, such that when you spout idiocy of saying was apartheid oppression, we can be very clear.
Yeah.
Or you go to now the United States and you start to say people are being killed on
genocide.
There's a genocide without you fully understanding. Because I think those are the types of people. And Rwanda, by the way, this is where there's a huge difference. Say stupid things in Rwanda, stupid things will happen. Say stupid things in South Africa, you might get a podcast and funding. So bit of a difference in terms of how you do governance. So maybe it's an issue again. I'm saying South Africa is very liberal with stupidity. Yeah. So I think that's a big difference. And again, it goes back to the same thing of you make the decision.
Yeah.
And I don't think we quite made the decision to say, look, for the future, I've always have a mentor in the foresight. He says, look, the beauty about the future is that the future is easier to discuss because no one fully owns it.
True.
Meaning we can make an architect of it. So what the Rwandan leadership has done is that they make the future about their generation. Hence you find ministers in Rwanda who are 34, 35. Have been educated. 34. And competent.
Sheesh.
That's the thing. And it's not like they do you a favor, because remember, in a genocide, a lot of the males got killed. A lot of the older generation got killed. So they always say, look, for them, it's normal that Stan should be leading because Stan is the best and brightest among us. For some reason, that's not how things go here at home.
Called political deployment.
Yeah. And like I always say, I have no issue with political deployment. If you're saying Stan is the best and brightest among us, it makes sense. And I think we shy away from it because maybe it's an issue of saying, look, maybe this is where I think the history and of our history gets a bit blurry, where people misuse it and they weaponize it to say, but Stan, when you went to school, I didn't go to school. So Stan must feel guilty now.
Yeah, that he went to school.
Like, you didn't go to school. I'm like, but if Stan can do better, it means he can open the doors for all of us.
Yes.
So I think that's a key issue, that you make those decisions. But most importantly, go back and explain it. The same President Kagame I speak about, he goes back. We have our version of State of the Nation. They have theirs. It's called Mshikorano. Mshikorano. Yeah.
Ah.
Obviously, I'm not learning the perfect language, but
Yes.
To sum it up is, they used to meet over a week, sometimes a month, but now they make it over 2 or 3 days. The president comes, he gives his version of what the State of the Nation is for about 20 to 30 or 40 minutes.
Okay.
He sits down. It's held at their version, the convention center. The prime minister will come and give the technical math details, or saying, listen, we were meant to be here. We've fallen short here. But what I found most amazing, because I got an invite to it, it's held at listed, when you're in Durban, say the ICC, or their version of Sentin ICC. Ministers, the military, the police, the political elite, the economic elite are all sitting down there. And then after the prime minister is done, they'll all sit down. And then citizens can ask any question they want. Any question they want.
Sure.
I think that asked was about agriculture. So this new minister of agriculture, I think he'd been there for less than 4 or 5 months. Hey, they started to ask, look, the president came to the village XY. This is what we were promised. We got this, but the infrastructure to maintain it was not there. And then the president said, minister, answer.
Account.
And you do not want to be in that. It's the first time I saw a cabinet member shake. Because how he started was he was being political. The president says, no, you're speaking nonsense.
Sheesh.
Account. Respect.
So the president is defending the people right there on the spot.
This is account. You're speaking nonsense. Tell the truth. But I didn't know. No, we hired you.
Yeah.
When we hired you, is this not your field? Yes. Account. And the man had to account. And I was like,
this is not in some back room, boardroom, nothing.
And just to show you, look, even those who could not be in the room, they beam them in. So there'll be certain sites set up in the country where you can go in front and you can ask a question. And every minister, even the president himself, is expected to account. And I was like,
you lead this group of ministers.
Account. And I was like, so I thought of we have a State of the Nation where I've never quite understood why we must have it. Because if you're going to read a screen, why can't you do it at home? Yeah. And then we can all just be...
Or record a video.
But it should be the key question. But then they explained to me, in that culture 300 years ago, that was the expectation of leadership. And I think we have the same culture that we expect when you go to our villages, our chiefs.
Yes.
And our kings, they're getting hoto.
Yeah.
So it made me, so what they've done is they've taken part of what is in their history and is in their DNA. They've put it into governance. We have done it in part. We call it when the president, the president's talk shops, when he goes around, when they go around.
Yeah.
But it's a bit management.
Yeah.
And again, it's not to say that Rwanda has
a lot
everything.
PR line than anything.
Again, it's not to say they do it 100%, but I'm just telling you things I've seen where we need to give, we have to give props to where it's working. But they'll also tell you what I do like about them. As a nation, they're hungry. They'll tell you it's not enough. Even the president will say it's not good enough. Unfortunately, I don't think we ever get to a point where, even with President Mbeki, when he was doing the great things, people were satisfied. And in that satisfaction, complacency came in. And we never wanted to ask the question, what comes next after this man?
Yeah.
So for them, even now, it's a big thing of, we're not happy. They believe it's in... And this, as I said, if it starts from the church and it even goes, even the children now say that they want better.
They understand.
They understand it. The mandate is quite clear. Better is the mandate. Let's speak to your normal average South African. When I go home to, man, we are just simply scraping by.
You're expecting food parcels.
Yeah, no.
All right. Let's get into the papers. We have 3 papers for this episode. We could go on and on about the past of this country and what the future should look like versus other countries. I love Rwanda, by the way. I think there's a lot of things they get in right that as a country we can borrow and learn a lot from. But we have 3 papers here. First one is the Palestine paper. There's the Kenya paper. There's the Sudan paper. The Palestine paper is AI, occupation and warfare. Kenya is AI governance and data sovereignty. And the Sweden paper, which is the hardest paper by far. The oversight and human rights documentation. Starting with the Palestine paper. Just off the bat, what's your reaction to this paper?
Well, if this paper had been published 10 or 15 years ago, I think people would have been it would have been more contested.
Okay.
And just maybe to give a background, it speaks about, I think it's almost a digital apartheid. It's the idea of, look, obviously there's a Palestinian formative state, and then there is a state of Israel.
Right.
And everybody, and I think it's not a secret, the politics behind that.
Yeah.
But I think what this paper does quite well, it speaks about what now people are coming to know, which is the digital ICT infrastructure behind that. That, look, you can be in Israel, which is a world leader when it comes to ICT development and startups. But within Palestine, that very same architecture, which makes Israel, number one, has been weaponized in such a form that it's exclusionary for people in Palestine. And not only exclusionary, it becomes weaponized to the point of where you can really start to see the military uses it to get certain the Israeli Defense Force uses it to get certain outcomes.
So how should one understand this two, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine? Are they two independent states or are they one?
And I guess that's a big look. It should be two. It should be that Palestinians have the right to live in what is also their land. And obviously the state of Israel, it exists. Now, obviously there's always a lot of politics around how do you draw the border along the lines of, and that's not what I think one gets into, but I think there should be a clear understanding that, look, the state of Palestine should exist. People should have the right to live in their own home. They are Palestinians. And again, when you say Palestinians, not as always just speaking Muslims, they're Christian Palestinians as well, Catholic Palestinians. So it's a state. But unfortunately, it's not been allowed to become a full sovereign state with the ability to be able to even develop its own ICT, right? And then there is the state of Israel, which, look, they all say, listen, it's for their defense. But then it does become a question in relation to ICT. When does defense become oppression?
Right.
And look, just without obviously making it overly political, I think enough research and even international literature and reports are quite clear on that there is oppression. Because you can't say there's two different outcomes for people that live so close together.
Yeah.
That is just is anathema. It should not even really exist. So for me, that's where I take it from. And then obviously the digital divide. Now, we always speak about the digital divide and the content that we have and they have not. But once it's put and weaponized in this fashion, where literally there's a digital apartheid, as the author puts it, it becomes quite problematic because it simply says this wonderful thing in ICT and AI and everything. I think it has wonderful points of perspective, but the weaponization where you can exclude people from developing themselves using the same infrastructure you have, that's quite problematic. I think the author details this in, obviously, look, from her perspective, from a Palestinian perspective, and I think she does it quite well. And look, because of what has happened over the last 2 years, it's no longer a secret that, look, you're seeing how there's IDF and how the state of Israel uses this technology to sometimes go kill people, sometimes even just exclude people. And there's a key question, which I think if you're an African, you always have to ask, which is to say, we might not have it to that level, but the key question of weaponization of ICT infrastructure and its applications is something which needs to be foremost. And I think the author does a great job. And I think it's very important for developing countries to just think around that one.
Let me read a passage from this paper. The workflow described by 6 Israeli analysts, 2 plus about 972 magazines, illustrate extreme delegation. The validation officer has about 20 seconds to approve the recommendation before it is sent to the geolocation software, Waste Daddy, I think it's called. They are tasked with indicating when the target is sleeping at home in order to neutralize the individual and their family in one fell swoop. 20 seconds to make that decision where someone in their family can be wiped out.
Yeah. And then that's the scary part about it, that weaponization of for instance, the same very technology can be used to deliver food, to deliver medicine, but the active choice to say, listen, and the point you put, or the author puts of that 20 seconds is very
20
important.
seconds.
And the key question then becomes, who's making the decision in 20 seconds?
Yes.
Because sometimes it's not somebody, you've not studied the family, and you don't know.
In 20 seconds, you make the decision.
You make the decision. And I think that's probably the scariest part about that paper. And it's a reality. And you've seen it. I mean, it doesn't even have to go to drones. You've seen how, I think Mossad was able to use pages to eliminate leadership. And you're like, oh my word. So that idea of technology, not the liberated technology, not only, there's one thing is to oppress, which is for you to be able, the ability in the paper, I think, to be able to turn off the technology. But a whole other thing, the ability to use it, to weaponize it, is quite scary. And it's then makes you think, look, the key question of who makes the decision and how do you arrive at, for instance, I'm sure they don't go to court for this.
In 20 seconds?
No,
what court?
You don't go to court.
In 20 seconds, what human is making this decision? Yeah. This is all automated.
And also the issue of in war, what's that? Not shrapnel, but that idea that it's a concept in war of accidentally killing people. I went for Stan. Maybe Stan was not there that night, but
there was someone.
But I bombed the whole building.
Yeah. Because that was the order.
Yeah.
Go for the building.
And that's where it becomes problematic, which is your ability to research and design it. We applaud that. It is amazing. But your inhumanity,
right,
or your non-humanity to use that is what makes people very cold. And again, because it is, Israel is all pervasive. Israel is the power, is the power broker in that it's not a relationship of equals between Palestine and Israel. That is what makes it quite problematic. And again, that same technology then gets sold to the United States. Silicon Valley celebrates it. So it almost becomes like it's an enabling vicious circle.
And you see, the conversation around AI, normally the global north would talk about this dystopian version of AI where it's autonomous, it's killing people, it's taking jobs. And normally in Africa, we're having this conversation around AI to say, how do we use it to enable ourselves? How do we use it to develop products? How do we use it to make our processes quicker and faster? What this paper suggests is we need to quickly move past that conversation into whatever the West is now talking about, which we thought was just fiction. I mean, reading this, you'd think you're reading a script from a movie.
No, and that's the scary thing. In Foresight, they always say, look, these sci-fi type movies are not so far away than you think.
Right.
Because if someone can imagine it, they can do it. And that's the scary thing about it, Terminator and everything else.
Yeah.
And so the bigger question then is going to be, are our legal systems up to it, right? Because what happens when in a country such as ours, where criminality is out of hand? What does that look like when you now say SAPS, which we know, as the Mdlanga Commission is showing, is not too clean in terms of how it does its processes and systems. When they say, but no, Stan is a threat. Because remember, it's always the idea of you build the threat, which is a military term.
It is.
It's not really a civilian. It's a very military term. And that, you're right saying, that is a scary part. That even, I don't think the law, like I said, the 20-second window is, it is scary. And also there's a key question, as you're seeing even with these types of drone, can you ever call it back? So it's
once you set on a mission,
it's
locked in.
It's locked in. So because to call it back would mean what? And that is a scary thing.
Defy the protocol.
Yep. Yeah. So in as much as yes, in the West they say it's autonomous, but I think the West is also a bit duplicitous in that they're funding this. By the way, they're very happy to take on the benefits of it. But yeah, so they're not so innocent in this conversation, and there does need to be a reckoning. But again, who reckons it? Because at the moment, outside of China, who's developing this debate, how many other countries are there at the table? Yeah, none. We're just subscribers to this. Yeah.
Look, the paper also cites an internal error at a rate of about 10% in this technology, meaning there are people here that are mistaken and are just killed because they looked like, or they seemed, or the pattern behaved in a particular way. In a situation like this, how do you even govern? What does regulation look like?
I don't think govern in that situation because I would say the overriding principle is the human. I'd say the discriminatory patterns of the human has been embedded into the system. So that 10% is simply saying, oh, look, you were the wrong shade of color at the time, but you were close enough to that other shade. So yeah, sorry. I don't think you govern the technology at the point of launch. You govern it pre, which is, there does need to be a question of what type of country or state are you who's comfortable with this? Now, in the question of war is war, obviously.
War is war, yeah.
But even war has protocols.
That is true.
True. So the key question of saying what governs you, because if your governance is simply your prejudice, then you can't govern that.
No.
You can't. And so I think what then becomes in this situation is the key question of who are the enablers, and you then basically write who's a stakeholder. And what we do know, as relates to the paper, is the biggest stakeholder for Israel is the United States.
You studied something fascinating, failure analysis. What is this field? And I just want to understand it in analyzing the paper and how the technology is deployed by the Israelis. Is this a failure moment, or is it a built-in deliberate something that looks like failure?
I go with probably the latter, but the idea of failure analysis comes from engineering. It's a key principle which simply says when you build something, civil engineering, you're building a road, right? The key questions you should ask is, when I'm building the road, there's a key question: how long in terms of years do I want this road to last?
Okay.
If it's going to last, what do I need to put into place?
Cool.
And key questions of what would destroy this road? Right. That's why and I know South Africa is not always the case with our roads. When you're building the road, they speak about the depth you go to when you're building. You need to really dig out, dig in.
Right.
That gives that stability. Right. So in this paper's recognition, it would be what does failure look like for this technology? Clearly, failure in this.
We already have that 10%.
Yeah, so clearly, if you have the 10%, it just simply means the margin for error has already been designed to be small. And you spoke about then, is it embedded? And that's a key issue. Is that I don't think the way it is built, failure analysis has really been put into there. It simply has been launched because I said because we then speak about in failure analysis, what are the safeguards? I don't see the safeguards.
No.
The paper doesn't quite speak to it, and you're seeing it now with autonomous, with drones, and with Iran and the US, or what's happening there. So I don't think the level of failure analysis has been put in at one might say a deterministic in a normal. Maybe technologically, you can say, look, they know. As I said, do they go back? I don't think so, but they would be able to say, listen, how does it not get hacked and return to sender? So that's the level of failure analysis, right? Which is putting that system, the overrides. So
as long as the failure is not this side.
Yes, failure is there, not this side.
Anything can happen over there, over here.
So that's I think.
So at that point, is there still failure on that side?
So there is failure analysis, but it's just a predetermined, which is within Palestine, not within Israel. Which then so at an engineering, you marvel to say, wow, that it's amazing. We can't deny it is amazing. But as a human being, and from a perspective of just governance and how we deal with ourselves as human beings, not great at all.
And how often do you see failure analysis in governance? How often is it built into governing structure, even literature?
I'd say Asian countries lead in this. The Chinese, the Singaporeans, they always ask a key question. Even Rwanda, they always say, for instance, when in South Africa was the last time you ever heard a policy had failed and then was taken away and killed, as in aborted?
Yeah.
We don't abort policies in South Africa.
No.
We just simply rename them.
And we AI them.
Yeah, we AI them, which is interesting because the party that's doing a lot of AIing but that's a discussion for another. What is the discussion for another day? But in South Africa, we don't do the perspective of saying,
yeah.
Because remember, policy, I always say when I teach you, policy is not perfection. But in South Africa, we design policies as though they are perfect. In other countries, they say, listen, policy is about targets and measurements. And sometimes because even from an engineering perspective in economics, you can project when something is not going to be a success. Why don't you stop it before we waste more money, sunken costs?
Right.
So, but we don't do that in South Africa. And in China, the thing is, people always marvel that the Chinese must be the most brilliant human beings. No, the Chinese government, when you speak to them, they're very clear. They say, when we see a policy is not working, we kill it. We stop it and we start again. And now what we know, especially from your field, the issue of data and analysis, even failure has data which you can learn from. Our policies simply have this inability to learn from what failure is. For instance, we'd rather say national health insurance. Obviously, we all want it for everyone. But data tells you that the public sector hospitals are not being funded properly. We don't have the right thing. It is crashing. But yet you still want this idea of national health. Isn't the right thing to say is pause it, fix public hospitals, fix clinics, really get data between why aren't these two speaking to each other? Why aren't we able to pay and get doctors in and get specialists in? And then once that system is embedded and it's working, then we can go to an NHI. But here, that's why I say you see failure analysis is not being used because the ideology trumps the decision. It's like, no, we must have NHI.
Yes.
And who's going to argue to say, who's going to say, no, we don't want? We all want a system where we're not paying these medical aids our livers at the end of the month.
Amounts.
But the key overriding issue is to say the reason we're paying an arm and a leg is we know that the public sector health system is not working. That's where you can clearly see failure analysis not working. And even the data linked to it is not being, I don't think it drives our policies. I always make this example when I'm speaking to government to say, data health is the future. I mean, Discovery is no longer a medical aid company. Discovery is a technology company.
It is.
So think about GEMS. And I know all our parents who work for the civil.
That was supposed to be Discovery long before Discovery.
Exactly. So are you telling me that...
No, nothing against Discovery, by the way.
Yeah. Are you telling me that there's no one at GEMS who's thought about when you speak about NHI or pre-NHI, what do the analytics look like? For instance, who even owns that data?
Where is it sitting?
Where is it sitting?
And what do we do?
We know there's paper. With that, we cannot deny there's files of paper because we've all had parents who are sick, and for them just to simply get a commendation for GEMS to pay it's just long. So it's those questions which says you're sitting on what is gold. Data is gold.
Data is gold.
But Discovery has outpaced you. And how police, same thing, data. Like, and I've always said, look, you don't need to have a PhD because I've always asked, are police stations where crime is happening, or why must I have to wake up to go to a police station? Don't the police know where the crime is happening?
Where's the intelligence?
Yeah, and logic should tell you put police where crime is happening. So, and that's not even a data. That's just simple human intuition. So if you want to know how maybe you can have the opposite of an Israel, is that data is all pervasive. Data is there. It's what do you do with it?
Yeah.
And look, in the case of this paper, I think it kind of shows you that you can do the extreme, which is you weaponize it to kill people. But then in the South African case, you can also see you simply do nothing with it, but the private sector outstrips you. So it's a huge spectrum. It's actually a very scary spectrum of death and not using data. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, just a sec. My laptop is dying. Should have charged this thing a long time ago.
Dell. You guys love Dell, ne?
Is it not from our government, this thing? Government buys this, and then if you work from a tech hub, you might buy one second hand.
I just thought people love Dell. It's like so many people in your field. I know there are those that love Apple, but then when you're like, okay, this person is on Dell, they're serious about life.
All right. We are back. Please take me through the concept of digital colonialism and I struggle to pronounce this, necropolitics.
Those are big ones. Even I am still trying to understand. Look,
I mean, the paper makes mention of these concepts
Mm.
and it throws them around like that. I just want to understand what do they actually mean and where do they come from from literature.
I think the one is more familiar with. Obviously, look, it's when you speak about what's a colonialist one?
Digital colonialism.
Yeah, look, it kind of speaks of it's that divide, right? Which is to say, I call it being a subscriber to the economy, not the owner of the economy.
Okay.
But in this, I guess, in that context, it speaks about the fact that it is very possible that at the high end, as in where value is derived from these technologies, there's a divide. We call it the global north divide, but even among the north, there's a divide.
There's a divide, yeah.
Because really, when you speak about who are the big players in this artificial intelligence, look, it's the Americans, it's the Chinese, right? And that's a scary part. That how do you put it? The subtotal of human ingenuity in ICT and artificial intelligence rests in two countries, America and China. The rest of us then just simply become subscribers to it. But then obviously, when you take it a bit further, in the context of the continent and maybe developing countries, because China sits at a duality between it is developed, but it's also developing.
Yes.
But then, like what I say, the real masokolare, the real one, was struggling. The Chinese at least have the ability now to start making.
Yeah.
In truth, the rest of the developing countries, we're simply just taking in.
Yeah.
And it locks you and it embeds you in there. I think your term you use as that substack. You're stuck in it.
You are.
And that's now where it comes in, which is to say, if your ideas aren't coming through, your person is not coming through, the infrastructure is too expensive for you, but it can be rented out. So you're simply in a circle of this colonialism of a special type, which is it's a digital one. And when the economy becomes more digital, you become more dependent, but you become less of a player in it. So that's how it goes through. The necropolitics, I'm more used to the maybe narcotics of that, of it. But so I would assume it goes into that field of just saying it's a specific type of politics which has a specific type of individual or individuals that sort of control it. Yeah, but I'm always subject to change on that one. Yeah.
Okay. This digital colonialism, how across the continent, how should one be first thinking about it, and how should one again be understanding it from big tech? The fact that most African states run on big tech, can we then say to some extent we are digitally still colonized? I mean, we were colonized by political regimes.
Yeah.
Can we now say that the presence of all these big tech companies on the continent is in itself a form of digital colonialism?
You could, and I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at it. Look, from one of the fields I also study is national interest.
Yeah.
From that perspective, and we know, just using South African government and many other governments, if you're all beholden to Microsoft, because if is it 2 years ago, a year ago, there was that blackout on WhatsApp and many other systems.
Yep.
That was a clear example of you are not in control.
Yeah.
So if you're not in control as a government, what are you exactly doing? Or let's put it like this: if you're not paying your monthly or yearly subscriptions to Microsoft,
they cut you
as a government. They cut you. So how does government then communicate among itself? And that is that is a security.
Yeah.
That's a sovereign problem. And look, I think the one thing the Iranians have shown us is that if you and the Chinese, they're very built. If you're not building your own ecosystems, you're simply beholden. And the thing now, which I think President Trump has overtly shown you, is they can cut you off. And if you imagine if Pretoria's cut off from the rest of South Africa, you don't even know it. Meaning, in the old days, the old coup d'etats used to be, we come, we take out Stan, you gag Stan, you put Stan in a room, and then you take over SABC, and then you announce, I'm now in charge. Now they don't even have to announce it. You would not even know it until it's too late. So if you are unable to do that, and I think it is a problem, I'm a believer that, look, if you're an African government, you should not be on Microsoft. This is where you need to find other means.
Okay.
What other means looks like? You must go speak to Stan. That's what they're developing. That's what both Stan need to be paid to be doing.
Yeah.
Because it's a danger to you as a society.
It is.
So in short, that is it. And I think it is problematic because your national sovereignty. And look, it's not how you might find Microsoft is the nicest company. Nothing against Microsoft.
Sure.
Nice company. I like Word. Still use Excel, even though I
Hey,
don't
man,
understand
I'm
it
on Word
fully.
right now.
Yeah, but it's not safe for you as a country because President Trump has shown you
Yeah.
that when the American government turns to screw on, they will bend. And I think those countries, this is where the French are a bit different. Even the EU is now finding out to say, hey, you know what? It's not safe if we're taught in investment that you should not have your eggs in one basket. So if you have all your technology in one basket, is that not really a very foolish way to invest?
Yeah, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So is it a fight for sovereignty or is it a fear of being colonized? And I mean, I struggle sometimes to understand the two concepts. When we want to be a sovereign state as far as technology is concerned, and when we say we don't want to be colonized again, ergo the term digital colonialism. So how do you differentiate between the two? How do you know whether how do you differentiate from being a state that's colonized by big tech and a state that's fighting for its sovereignty? Are the two the same or are they different?
That's a good one. Look, I would put it like this. The sovereignty idea is, well, I'll use South Africa and the EU. Sovereignty is South Africa says, listen, we're fine with Huawei. They can come, they can give us their 5G towers and we can get into agreement. No problem.
Yeah.
Sovereignty, that's it. Same way, sovereignty. Oh, look, an American company wants to come and build things. No problem. Open for business. You can exercise sovereignty.
Okay.
Now, like the difference though is the EU, America says we are not comfortable with you working with Huawei. Oh, okay. Now, how do we find a way to kick them out? So for me, that's how I juxtapose the issue of sovereignty. Sovereignty is, we're not saying you can't use them, but it's my ability to opt out.
Choice.
That's all it is. Especially in the digital thing is, do I have choice? Because if I don't have choice, you're simply saying your stack or Substack I'm stuck in, there's no one else. Then it becomes problematic. And then the issue of the colonial thing is, you've made the choice, it's fine. But have you got internal capacity to, if the choices you have made are now a danger to national sovereignty, to your national interest, have you got the infrastructure, human and otherwise, to be able to build your own? That for me is colonial.
Okay, so now we're talking power.
It's power
versus choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Power should give you the ability to make the choice.
Right.
But if you don't have a choice, it's
what power do you have?
Yeah, I think the late academic Thandika Makandori used to say about democracy. You know, they say go vote. There's choices. He says choiceless democracy. You don't really have a choice.
They give you a list.
It's like, yeah, you can put X for anyone there, but there's only a white paper. Yeah. So there's no options type of situation. Yeah, so that's why I think because the thing is, what we're seeing is that these companies.
Yeah,
this is me. Oh my. These companies don't come from neutral places. These companies themselves are not neutral. And that's where, for me, the colonial... Because remember, these companies, even the United States government now has problems with these very same companies. They can't control them. So that's a key question of, you're beholden to the Zuckerbergs of the world, the very problematic Canadian South African person, and his Starlink. You're beholden to these people. And that is the issue of sovereignty, that you're not in control.
The Canadian South African with Starlink, do you not think he brings a solution? Again, to bridge the digital divide, where he comes in space and he bypasses the territorial stuff that we have, meaning that the same internet access you afforded in urban city, you could ultimately get in a rural. Do you not think he brings a solution in that sense?
He brings his solution.
Yes, true.
Now, I'm one of those, if you're a country who wants to do it and you don't have the ability to scale up, then it's a solution. But if you're a country like South Africa, where you've been on the receiving end, where you can see this person has nefarious things, it's not a solution, because you've got those very same companies and you've got financing where you should be bridging that.
Yeah.
There is no way, you're not telling me you cannot sit down with Vodacom, MTN, and all the cellular providers and say, listen, as a business, he's a threat to you. As a country, he's a threat to us. Make it happen. Fix this digital problem that separates township, urban, and rural areas. So for me, that's the difference. South Africa has the ability. It should have long ago. So it should be a non-issue in South Africa. But it's been made an issue because of poor governance and the lack of investment into it. Now, when a country like Lesotho does it, because I know Starlink is there, it's still a problem for South Africa because that's where you're supposed to say, hey, Vasut, love the blankets, love the water you guys give, but not in our backyard.
Yeah.
But we should then be able to say, we'll give
Here's
you
the alternative.
Here's the alternative,
Yeah.
which we're
You
willing
can't
to
say don't. And
yeah, we can't say don't without you giving an option. If he does it in a place far, let's say he's doing it in Djibouti, South Africa, does it really bother? Nah, it's a solution for them. So it's a key question of proximity and ability. And the South African state, by state here I mean private sector, public, they've long had the ability to close this gap. That they
Why is it not happening? Why can't we just band together the telcos and go, okay, at this level you will band together and share revenue. At this level you can compete, whatever, for subscriptions and. But we're going to put you together so that we can create enough resources and capacity to build this satellite form of internet that everyone can then tap into. The competition will exist at this level. Why can't we get that right? Is it a political will issue? Is it that there's brown envelopes moving about so that such decisions are not made? I mean, the same question could be posed to the banking sector, even to say, look, we have a huge number of our population who are not served as far as banking is concerned. And some of that is just deliberate. Why do we not create an infrastructure for banking that all bankings can tap into and then compete at a subscription level? But as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we all subscribe to this, which then can be partly state-owned and then partly private sector-owned. Why can't we get that right?
I think it's a question of the national interest. There is no defined national interest in South Africa.
Does it go back to 94?
I would say that. Because it's the same 94. This is, look, I like President Thabo Mbeki, but the decisions where he allowed the private sector to run rampant. Remember, he's the one, he said, you guys can leave the country. You don't have to be linked to here. SAB Miller and all those guys ran for the hills. So it is that moment that, and look, they might say, I mean, one of the people who used to work for them is my mentor and he was my supervisor. And he said, look, TK, we were broke state. What do you think we were going to do? Yeah, we didn't have. But then there does come a point where I think there is a very loose definition of national interest. Because national interest would do what you said, which is you get the CEOs in the room and say, no, look, guys, we're not having it. For me, private sector must make as much money as it wants so we can tax. It's fine. But when it comes to certain things which are critical, infrastructure, ICT infrastructure of the future, that's a non-negotiable. We are all in it. Meaning you can't come with your hands and say, but no, we want to be, no. And especially because I said South Africa has that unique position where we've got the money internally to do great things. Our private sector has that money. But the private sector will also say to you, but TK, when you deal with those ones, you see what they do. So it does, but if it was a national interest and it was above board where everybody could see, then I think it would be a non-issue.
Yeah. Lastly, on the Palestine-Israeli thing, the issue, which is a big one. The paper makes mention of an automated apartheid. Do you find that great technologies like AI are enablers to this automated form of apartheid, which is now what we are seeing in the matter between Israel and Palestine, and that can be something that can trickle down to other states, where at the end of the day is one culture or group of people versus the other. How do you react to this concept of automated apartheid in the age of AI and all sorts of great technologies that are coming up?
Look, I think in a broader sense, if we look at the two other papers, the one about Kenya and digital sovereignty and rights and what that looks like, and even the one, I think the one with Sudan, I think it all speaks to that. And how one views is to say that there does come to a Damascus moment is needed. while this technology is it's outstripping, it's outpacing our ability in policy. Because policymakers, as we've learned with our minister who basically outsourced it to ChatGPT, not premium, but a cheap version in writing our AI, a free version in outsourcing it to our AI policy.
Another minister did the same for Home Affairs.
Yeah, same party, same WhatsApp group apparently. Yeah. So, but it is that question where this is where you do feel sorry for them, especially from a governance perspective, that these things move so quickly that what we discussed last year, I mean, we've just had the issue of is it not Claude and it's Fable? I think it's
Fable.
Fable, where the American government said, nope, this is only going to be for Americans.
And Anthropic,
yes. So it kind of shows you that we're at a place where it's moving so quickly that it's hard. But I always say, look, let's go to first principles, as what you're saying, which is to say, what can the state or what can governments do? I think it's unique in that a lot of private sector companies will also now say, hey, look, this is a bit too much of a danger. So there does need to be a moment where you say, you as a country, what from these, because sometimes, look, there are those who, one of the things I looked at as one of the things, top 10 trends I'm looking at is, there also does need to be a level of hubris. How much of this is actually hubris? Because these anthropics, these companies, they're burning through money.
Yeah.
But what is it, their product exactly? And this is where I think you need to get the experts in the room. Those that are tech, or not just tech savvy, but I think tech overly optimists, and those that are negative.
Yeah.
You need to get those people in a room, and then you need to say, look, first principles, as a country, what can we control? That's the first thing you need to, what can you control? What can we not control? And I think once you start to have these two things, you come to that point of the Venn diagram, the in-between.
Yeah.
And then I think from the in-between, that's when you start to now say, look, how do we develop these policies?
Yeah.
At the moment, we are shocked. Everybody's shocked. I mean, that is it's not a lie. It is quite a shock to the system. And in the shock, there's also geopolitics. So people are scared. And then in between this, there is the incapacity of the state itself.
Ish.
And that's where I think we need to have the conversation to say, look, let's all bring it together.
Yeah.
If Discovery is doing great things, we need to say, Discovery, look.
Come close.
Explain this and this to us. And the thing is with South Africa's oddness is we have a lot of these people who are in Silicon Valley as well. We have good relations. Tencent, China.
Yeah.
You need to bring them in and say, guys, look, not just for South Africa's perspective, because remember, you need to, when you start to think, I don't believe in solutions.
Yeah.
For this, I think you have mitigations, because that's where we are. We have not come up with solutions. We have mitigations. So it needs to be, you bring in what we have as human capital, and you say, listen, one, what we can't control, what can we compete with? And this is where I think on the last podcast I said, you throw money in the same way we threw money at these state-owned entities. You throw money at Stan to say, fix.
Do this.
And then once we find that standards give us an alternative to what maybe is coming from the alphabets and all those companies, we say, Stan, we'll subsidize, it's fine. Because you're giving, because the thing is, you also can't get away from it must be commercially viable.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very important.
And then I think in the long term, in my Venn diagram, this is how I've worked out, governments need to get off these. You can't have a foreign entity.
Yeah.
You can't all go to a meeting and we all open our laptops and it's Microsoft.
Yeah. I think I saw a statement that Treasury was paying about 300 million a year to Microsoft.
No, you can't have that. So then it goes back to a question of how all these three papers come into being to say, listen, there are no solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, that maybe you guys, I know in your field, you guys are smarter. That's what you guys do. In my world, I say there are mitigations.
Right.
And then it's a key question of saying, what are you willing to take a loss on? I'm not one of those who say, just ban them. You can't ban them out.
You can't ban them.
But it's a key question of saying, how do you ride this horse such that the horse eventually you can get off the horse? And that's planning. And that's not where we've been great at. And the key, you spoke about the automation of apartheid, and even the paper about Kenya, of where you can now do surveillance and behavioral analytics and the like. You also then need to start to draw a very sharp line on citizen and protecting citizens. Because now, I mean, I think it was Captain America, not the Winter Soldier, but the one where those I think sci-fi issues of saying we can now start to predict when somebody's going to do a crime.
Oh yeah.
So it's better to actually kill them as a baby
now.
No, kill them as a baby
Yeah,
because they've got the
because
genetic.
you know that
Well, what they're
they're
going
going to be a problem.
It sounds far fetched, but that's where you are. So then you need to start doing those safeguards. And one of the, for me, obviously being a parent, is it's very funny when you look at the schools. I always say look at the behavior of drug dealers and look at the behavior of these alphabet companies. Do you
Yeah.
note that when they go to school, they insist that their schools, the schools their children go to, do not have any of these technologies?
Oh,
No, Zuckerberg and even Musk, they don't. Their schools they take their kids to.
don't have
No, they don't. They don't give their kids cell phones at 6 or 5.
pen and paper.
It's pen and paper. It's pen and
Go
paper.
learn arts.
Go
Go
learn-
learn how to engage your brain.
Go learn how to
use your
think.
hands. Yeah.
So you as a
The
government,
technology you'll see.
you're saying, look, I'm for whiteboards because I think our education system kind of needs that.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is to draw a red line. I'll just use education. What do I expect education to do? I expect education to allow people to think and be creative.
Yeah.
Do you necessarily need AI for that?
No.
No. So it's a key question of saying, and it's always been my issue with the premier saying, yes, we want to get AI into it,
No.
but you have load shedding. You have not trained teachers how to use these things. So I think it's still, that's what I'm saying. The Venn diagram kind of tells me in education, we need to go back to a point of what is education for?
Okay.
Where we can simplify it, we simplify it. And I think it's the same thing with many of these technologies. There needs to draw a distinction between citizens' rights and what you as a state can protect them from. And I think kids become, I don't think kids should be on these things.
Not yet. At
No,
least.
no, not until they can
Yeah, they can
form
make
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you as a parent are struggling with that, that's where you need the
Investigate.
state. Australia is doing it to say no. And that's what you can control.
Mm.
And then I think, and I know it's a contentious issue, I think if you're the South African state, you need to start going to the Chinese and saying, how do you actually build a firewall? It's I know it's contentious.
Yeah.
Because you need to look after your own, but then you need to scale it to the region.
Mm.
Now, I did say I'm a nationalist, so we're not doing it for free. But
Yeah.
but it's to say we can't stop everything from coming in. And I think a lot of all those 3 papers
Yeah.
speak to it, like you said, in a scary way,
Yeah.
but they should be forcing the conversation that as policymakers, as the private sector here in South Africa and across the continent, the only way we kind of will eventually be able to opt out is if we have our own.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, the second paper to this is the Kenyan paper, Algorithm Bias in AI Governance, Strategy for Promoting Data Sovereignty in Kenya's Public Service Delivery. So, Kenya is building systems across its public infrastructures and services around tax profiling, one in health, I think another in farming. I think this is a big moment, not only for Kenya, but for the rest of the continent. My question here is, what does it mean for the Kenyan government to get this right? And for the rest of the continent, what do we learn from Kenya? Should they get it right or they get it wrong? Right? How important is it for the Kenyan government to get this right? And for the rest of the continent, what are we learning?
Well, look, I think it's important that their reputation, they put their reputation on it. So you kind of have to get it right. You don't have a choice in that. But look, like you said, the bigger questions behind it are for its citizens. And,
Right.
things are quite contentious in Kenya. It's what are you getting it right for? Right. If it's for better governance, if it's for citizens' better engagement in the economy and the ability to better engage with the economy, brilliant. But then if it's simply because, I can't remember who the speaker was, but he said, the thing about ICT or AI as this fourth industrial revolution is, unlike the previous one, what is tangible from it is very hard to really quantify. In the past, a washing machine, which is more useful, a washing machine or ChatGPT?
Oh, yeah. I need my washing
You
machine.
need a washing machine. But the valuation of them are
Very different.
Very different.
Very different.
So I think it's the same thing with the Kenya situation, which is to say, okay, you do it. If it's to help scale and make governance better, all for it. But even when you get it right, who actually owns this? Because I think that's ownership now becomes an issue.
Okay.
Are you simply subscribing to get maybe foreign companies who can come in, who do it for you, who use Kenyans here and there, or is it really homegrown solution?
Shush. And I mean, they're building something called GovBot, an e-citizen platform, an AI-powered chatbot that delivers services in English and Kiswahili across SMS, WhatsApp, USSD, and other voice channel. They're building something called Adam, ADAM, an automated disease surveillance and management system for public health. Another one is PRISE, the pest risk information service for agriculture. And my favorite, authority text profiling system. So these are very important services you can understand, and they're touching on different sectors of government. And I'm just, how, if let's say you're building a governance structure for Kenya around this, and Kenya says, okay, we might have to borrow from China what China's expertise and capacities are. And how do you involve foreign government? How do you involve a China in a project like this, such that at the end of the day, your citizens are protected, such that at the end of the day, maximum your citizens enjoy the maximum output of this without any risks whatsoever? I mean, if we're talking about tax profiling, you don't want this thing to say, because you live in a risk environment, pay more tax, because now it starts profiling people, different people start, it becomes a very scary environment for people to participate in the economy, because this thing is just profiling people in a very weird way. How do you regulate? How do you build governance around this? Because I don't imagine Kenya does this by themselves. I mean, maybe they are, but if it were South Africa, I wouldn't imagine that we get all of this right by ourselves, given our capacity, given our knowledge and the technology landscape. How do you govern?
That's a hard one, because again, if you don't fully know the ownership, it becomes very problematic.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, look, I do believe we borrow from whence the best come from, whatever the best is. So, but then it becomes an issue of how do you erect several governance perspective. The key questions I'd ask is to say, ownership, obviously, you determine what that looks like. Is it 60-40, 40-60?
Yeah.
And then it's a key question of saying, am I subscribing to this forever, or when do you leave? Right. And when you leave, what does the exit contract look like? For instance, do you take that data with you so that you can sell it to your American, Chinese companies, and they come in at advantage or disadvantage to our local industry? So those are the things that you start to think around. And then there is also the question of who do you put, because for this, I would assume you have to have almost like a board of governors, of people whose work is solely to look after Kenyan interests, right? And part of the interest would be laws and regulations. Part of it would also be skills transfers. And this is where, for all its, I like broad-based Black economic empowerment in part.
Okay.
And the part I like is the skills transfer, which I don't think we've always got right.
Yeah.
The part which I still never understood, I always have this argument with my dad, is why would I have to go borrow money when I could simply say, give me the same money to go start up my own thing?
There you go.
Yeah, because I'm not saying I want to simply buy into your company because you're white. But I would say, if you're doing business with the state, I want to see that the management looks a bit more like the country.
Yes.
So that's that's always been my issue with BEE. But I said this is where it does become important, which is to say, look, it can't just be that you bring in your technicians from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, or from Beijing.
Yeah.
And then you come in and you leave. And all you're doing is simply putting a screw here and there, and you make it mysterious, it lights up, it looks different. And then you leave, but then at the point of exit of the contract, you've left me with no choice but to extend your contract. There you need to be very serious to say, no, skills transfer. And again, now the key question...
It's a matter of national interest.
No, it is a matter of national interest. And now when we say skills transfer, it's a question of saying, look, we're not simply saying, our STEM, our TIACA, so we're going to hire you. It's a key question of saying, Stan, we need to time you in to say, look, if let's say the contract's 20 or 30 years because it looks long based on what you've put there. Stan, you're only going to be in it for 7 years. And then Stan, you have to exit so that we can give other people a chance. So Stan, specialize. What are you going to take over from once this is done? And most importantly, when we say take over, and this is where I'll be a bit contentious, is Stan, it's not 100% you. We as a state want 30%. Because the national and 30% is we'll put money in. We'll help Stan to start up. It's fine. But it's to say, Stan, don't get ideas that in future you're going to sell it back to the same people you were working with, which goes back to foreign nationally.
Yeah.
You simply sell it to the foreign national
Yeah.
who you were working with because they were using you as a front. Yeah, so I think you build in these layers.
Yeah.
You would note in everything I'm saying, I'm not stopping it from happening.
No.
Because you like you said, you're in a position where you can't stop it.
Yeah.
And then it gets to what the points you raised about, okay, what is this thing going to be used for? And that's where I think you need to have a bit of a sit down, and there'll be trade-offs. And it's a horrible thing because with policy, we never like speaking about there are trade-offs. Stan is right in saying, hey, look, what if they want to create a social score? Because I'm a good taxpayer. Now, some of us are not great taxpayers, so it would not be
now
great.
You're in trouble.
Now you're in trouble. But again, then it goes back to the first principle. What did you want it to do in tax? Because my thinking would be, which would be different for South Africa, is they're having the Kenyan yes, they've got the formal market, but they've got a huge informal economy. So maybe my thinking would be you're creating it so that you can put a lot of those people onto the formalities of a tax system, and you're making sure that people, those that are escaping paying tax, get into the system, which is good. But the issue of informality is I think it's problematic if you're saying you're going to get the informal economy onto this so that they can simply pay tax. No, you're defeating the purpose of there's a reason why in the formal economy. What I'll be thinking is to say, okay, look, which of these formal economies do you want to pay tax? So there's some people, it's informal, but it's not formal. It's quite formal. They're just getting away from tax. Those ones, not a problem. The state needs the revenue. But then there's a bigger, I'll make it a bit different, is the developmental question, which is to say, of the ones to almost incentivize them to come onto this so that they are on the books, how then do we help them to do business better? How do we enable them to grow their businesses? How do we link them with funders? How do we do the things like that? So that's what I would be putting in as governance to say, it's a trade-off. But there needs to be something you give back for me to come onto the system. And sometimes I don't hear those conversations happening. Because if you come to me as a citizen and say, no, I want you just to come in, I'm going to say, but you're the same government that doesn't know how to spend money, but you want me now to start giving you money for free.
You're painting a very scary picture for me there. Because now, I say this because the paper also mentions that Kenya has a regulatory architecture that's fragmented. And this is across courts, public officials, and a number of important stakeholders there. If you have this fragmentation and you're embarking on a project like this, where is your national security?
Exactly. Because they should be front and center.
Right.
And not as in the controlling, but in the point to be able to say, can they account? And that for me is the scary part. That's why I said you need to kind of bring this in-house. And you would note even from the previous paper we spoke about, I'm a big believer in saying, get the people who know into the room.
Right.
Government doesn't know everything.
No. And they can't.
You can't.
They can't.
So, and isn't that if you look at how many of these ICT companies, even Zuckerberg is not an engineer, by the way.
No.
He's a dropout.
But
what does he do? I think there was that alien there where they said he was willing to pay the highest earning person in Silicon Valley. Yeah. You get the people that know to do the job. And the good thing about Kenya, as you've said, they've long been in it. They've got brilliant people.
They do.
They do. So why can't you, as humble yourself to say you don't know, and get that person to assist in one? This is it's a law thing where you say it's fragmented. Get that right. Just get the basics right. Then actually say, look, in this board of governors, in the same way, look, there's within boards, there's committees of risk and compliance. Get the people that know to do that. Let them advise you.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because the thing is, what this, at least the world of AI, ICT, should teach us is ego should not be the driving force of a country. I don't know. It's not my field.
Yeah.
But it makes sense for us to say, get the people that know. So I think you're right saying that they should look at it.
All right. The last paper, the hardest paper, this paper. the Sudan paper. Ozent, the future of protecting human rights. Let's just start there with just that title, the future of protecting human rights using Ozent. Is it possible?
Maybe just break out. Ozent, I always get the acronym wrong. It is
open source intelligence.
It's very hard. Open makes you believe almost like what's a big Chinese AI LLM?
DeepSeek.
Yeah, it's open source.
It is.
Open. It gives you open. And then we had that South African who had his own Linux. It was
What's that?
Shuttleworth, right?
Yeah,
Shuttleworth. Yeah. So you like the idea. Everybody likes it if it's open source as opposed to. Hey, but then can it protect? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing, right? Especially in the context of what we have to be clear. You know, what do we mean by look? I'm not a human rights advocate. That's one. That's just I believe in African rights, but it becomes a question of where and how, right? Because again,
I mean, sorry to interject, but you write as with the where and how, because the paper makes mention of the internet penetration in Sudan at about 30%, 29 point odd. And if that's the internet penetration of the country, how then do you rely on Ozent? I mean, what is the number of the population that actually have access to this? But the problem now becomes it's the only thing they have. With everything that's happening there, if you're a journalist, you get killed. All the reputable media organizations are destroyed, and you have this tool that can help you put your message out there, combining social media, essentially scraping the internet and sort of giving you a voice to say, hey, this is what's happening. But you're now in an environment where you are crying out to the world, but at the same time, looks like the world is just watching. So it's like a theater of sort where the world is like, oh, that's really happening. And in the world of deepfakes, now debates are sparking. Is this real? How do I know that this is really happening? And people are sharing videos of their neighbors, of their families, of heartbreaking things that are happening there with the help of this Ozent. How do you then relate to this technology of Ozent?
And I think probably that's the hardest part, because I guess in this conversation where the idea of government doesn't exist.
Start there.
Yeah, it doesn't exist because of the two forces.
Yeah.
And the foreign money which is involved in the situation.
Yeah.
And this is where you'd hope, and I guess maybe it's to the shame of the continent that we don't have a AU body, which wouldn't then be able to say, listen, in this context, because of the fractious nature of it, this authentic, because it's a good idea.
Right.
We can't get away from it. Because when you are family, friends in that situation, you want to know, are they safe?
Right.
You want news.
You want to know.
But then you don't want what you've just described, that voyeurism of people looking at it like theater and eating popcorn of people suffering.
Yeah.
And the preponderance of deep fake. So it's a key question of saying you wish the continent has an authority, which was, I'd say, more citizen owned than government owned.
Yeah.
Where many of the verification steps could be done. Where those who came up with it can say, listen, we're putting it there. So meaning, if you want to fund, you know what you're funding as an investor. And also, when you're investing, we're also making sure that you're investing such that you can clean up the fakes within it.
Right.
And that it doesn't now become a propaganda tool. And then it's a key question of that 30%. You're saying it is a hard one, because
it is.
That you kind of have a solution, but the context is such that it leaves you're in the air.
And again, back to governance. How do you govern? So here I am, an activist on the ground. I'm in Sudan. I'm witnessing terrible things that are happening. There are no proper channels to report this. So what I do, I take my phone out, patchy internet and all. I manage to record what's happening. how do you create an environment in Sudan that this that we collect as the citizens, this that we collect as people on the ground, can be submitted in court as evidence? How do you get that right, such that this thing, because I think that's what would break or make Ozent, is to say, sharp, it's the tool that's afforded to you, but to what extent and to do what with it exactly? Are we just going to keep crying to the world and the world keeps looking and going, deep fake or not deep fake? How, at the end of the day, how do I take these recordings of my brother, my cousin, my sister, people I love, my neighbors, my community being murdered, being violated in all sorts of manner and forms? How do I take those videos, recordings, audios, and submit them to a court to say, here's my evidence of what's happening?
I always say, look, I don't have the answer for certain things because this is a hard one. But I think you give some solution in the sense that the ability to turn it into a form of 21st century admissible evidence, right? For instance, there was no, if you think about Liberia, blood diamonds, even with Rwanda, this technology was not there. The fact that I think is a positive, but you're right in saying maybe what's needed, and this is, again, it becomes problematic because you say if you to the diaspora among themselves of politics in Sudan. But I think it's a key question saying those that have come up with it, and it's good that they've done it, they should, like what you say, I think you've given a solution to say, treat it as a form of future archival tool for when, because it has to end eventually, but using it as a tool such that when it does end, and we pray it does come to an end, that war, it can be used in court. And I think that's the framing of it. So if you then start to frame it in that way, even if the founders, and we hope they're serious about it, then the onus then lies on them to say, look, you have to verify. And it's hard to verify in that context, but it's a key question of, again, having 30% penalty, it's hard then to get the triangulation.
Right.
So it is hard. I will not lie that. It's a hard one, because the positive I see is what you've said, which is when this does come and justice has to be meted out, at least there's proof. But it's a key question of, you don't want to put people in a situation where I don't like you because of your politics and I embed you. Yeah,
it's a tough one.
It's a very,
and again, what the United Nations, or let's even forget those, as the 54 countries, do we look away? What can Africa do to what's happening between Israel and Palestine, to this civil war in Sudan? How long do we keep watching?
And I think that's a tough one, and I'll start with the Sudan one because I think that's closer to the continent. Look, there's been an inability, and also if you look at the people that are involved, the monies. I mean, you have the UAE, major player, and this is because I think there's this brilliant, I think it's a Nigerian podcaster, Jude. He makes a point of saying the very same Man City people love. The head of it has been facilitating many of these things.
Shush.
So maybe it's at the point of, and again, we don't. It's not like we buy a lot of their shirts anyway. so
it's Man City to start with.
So there is a question where I think if the continent was, look, the biggest thing the continent is when there's real leadership, and this is where it's a regional thing. Because look, the types of monies, Mahetis and them that are involved in the civil war, the AU cannot really do much. Where I think you've given a bit of a way in, is to be able for, as I said, the AU comes in and says, listen, we will obviously try, get the mediators involved, but when justice, at the point of justice would be, take this onset, the AU should be saying, look, find who the funder, who's come up with it. If you are able, if they're outside or inside, come to an agreement of saying, listen, how do we help you verify and keep this data for purposes of prosecution one day?
And look, it's open source, right? You film an atrocity So because you want to have proof that this thing happened. You are witnessing someone you love getting killed or whatever the case might be. And you want to say, okay, I've got the proof that this thing happened. I can submit it to authority. Human rights then archive it as evidence. At what point do you draw the line between privacy and policy? I mean, at what point do you then say you're violating someone's dignity versus you trying to get public evidence?
I think this is where it would help if they were given some form of infrastructure from the AU, in the sense that, look, and this I'm a believer in, you don't have to show people being killed. That I
But how do you know they're being killed?
I think it would be an issue of who was it? That's a verification. You're right to say that's
and we're talking about an environment in Sudan where the media is almost non-existent because nobody wants to be killed for reporting news.
Yeah.
And journalists are scared. It's a very, very, very hostile environment. All you have is the citizens and this piece of technology called OSINT, open source intelligence, where it's using social media, it's scraping the internet, and people are trying to get whatever little proof they can to say, hey, it's happening, we need help. And the courts are fragmented. It's policies not well put together. I've got this. Is it submissible in court? Human rights, are you archiving this for evidence? I mean, this is my wife who's being raped here. At what point is the dignity preserved? So is this technology working? And if it's not, what's the alternative?
I would probably say think about when it wasn't there. We don't have to think, because we've seen genocides where people have not been there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the key thing with these types of atrocities is the perpetrators get away with it because they're sometimes not known after the fact. So we have that now.
Yeah.
But it's like you're saying, it's a key question of verifying that the perpetrator did the act and that they actually are a perpetrator, not that it's a politically instigated thing. And that's why I think places like the AU should be able to get in there, not get in there, but fund to say, listen, let's help you clean it up. Like you said, let's clean it and document it for you. And look, almost do the pre-trial not the determination, because you still want courts to do. That's for courts to do.
Yeah.
But get the information such that it's put in cataloged.
Yeah.
In a way that when this does eventually come up, you who was on the receiving end of this should have a place where you can go and say, listen, this happened for me. And in the quickest possible way to say, oh, but wait, we actually have this catalog somewhere. And then that's when you do it. Was it you? Oh, was it your family? Because then the onus is not on them to have to rethink what happened. It's an issue of saying, at least it was cataloged. At least now it's a key question of saying, look, courts, with whatever the AU and this artists have put together, this is a catalog, this is what happened. It's for you not to verify. But that poor person is not starting from scratch where I have to say this. And then it's like, okay, how do we now get it? How do we now get verification? Oh, let's go there. And like, as you know, unfortunately with the history of Sudan, also related to the southern Sudan, is that a lot of these military people have the ability to quickly go simply burn, get rid of evidence. So I think the biggest thing, and that's the only thing I think, and I like the way presented, is to say the AU should be an enabler to catalog this and quickly catalog it in such a way, in a legal way. Because there's cataloging and then there's cataloging for purposes of legal.
But what teeth does the AU have?
None.
It'll just be suggestions. Okay, we suggest.
I think this could be big only because the issue should be when the person who's been at the receiving end wants that information. And maybe that could just be the biggest thing the AU can do. We're using on and the like. More than that, look, it's a politics and infrastructure that they simply just do not have. Because also, I think post of it, because a lot of the time, and I think even with these war acts, it's the military that has given orders. It's politicians that have given orders. So maybe in cataloging it, once these things plays out, it should be the AU's due to say, let's trace and track who gave the order.
Yeah.
Such that person, because he can't now come in as Snow White and say, oh, because there'll always be some person who's going to come in as a savior and say, I helped this. And then we can say, but no, look, we can trace it back that you're involved, and such person should not be allowed nowhere near platforms of power. And that's why the AU and the African Union should be saying, nah, dude, there's evidence you have to account for. We're not sorting this out.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
The first paper in the episode, the Palestine paper, spoke about algorithms ultimately deciding who lives and who dies. The second paper on the Kenyan paper spoke about Kenya building a lot of the systems on AI and food service delivery, essentially. And this last paper that we spoke about on Sudan is on open source intelligence. One of the papers that we did in episode 1 of this series, which we said with Prof. Geshi, spoke about how young research in this field is. It dated the research to about 10 years. So if research in this data, AI, and fourth industrial technology is that young, what relationship should governments be having with academia? Was academia itself, it's still trying to figure out what this thing looks like and operates like. What relationship should African states be having with academia to better regulate, to better understand how these technologies should work for the African people?
Look, for me, the first protocol would be 10 years, but I think 10 to 12, 15 years with children. I think that's where you start. It's a question of you bring in these psychologists who are able to map these things. This is like, right, it's like you need evidence for this one. This is one of those where I might have a feeling about AI and these companies, but I think what you firstly do is you map out to say, listen, the effects on human beings, especially on human beings on the continent. And this is children, adults, and how we work, right? And then you bring in the idea of the economy, right? To say, look, exposure and what this looks like. And then the third thing then would be to say, okay, this is where institutions of higher learning pick a path. And the difference might be who's great at doing what. Maybe the Kenyans are brilliant at the issue of technology as it relates to scraping. Let's fund them to say, look, you guys excel at this. South Africa, you excel at that. But the point should be we should have centers and regions and universities who are leaders in a developing field. But the key issue should be in the service of national interest, right? To say, what does it mean? Because what you're saying, the big thing about these papers is there's a meaning to them.
Yeah.
We don't quite, we know it. If you look at the Sudan paper, you know the atrocity. You see what it looks like. With the Palestine, you see what it looks like as well. With Kenya, we quite don't know what it's going to look like. Yeah. So it should be the question of saying, how do we make a determination? What we're researching is the effects and what it looks like. And I think that's where universities should also then be able to say, listen, maybe some of the traditional ways in which we do things in terms of how we understand this might be a bit different. But the key thing would have been governments have to come in with funding, because you can't have all of this hanging. You get foreign funding to look at the same foreign problems that these companies are bringing in. That's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
So the key should be how they do capacity, and also what do you want them to do?
Yeah.
My ultimate thing is quite simple. It should be, how do we get off this horse in the next, it might be 50 years from now.
But we got to get off.
But we have to get off this horse. And how do we make our own horses work? And look, the trade-off might be, we might not be able to build the biggest and the best LLMs. That's fine.
It's okay.
But surely we can build 2. And these 2 then should be all African universities subscribe to them.
Yeah.
Because these things all work on data at the end of the day. They're monsters. They feed on it. They need to feed off it. Then where I think we can get to the questions of infrastructure. Can we do it cheaper and better? The one thing DeepSeek, the fear of DeepSeek is, if you look at the arms race that's happening in Silicon Valley, these companies, the chips, they're I mean, even the data centers are thirsty animals. Can we not do it better? We have to do it better, because really, we haven't even spoke about one of the papers one hopefully is working on. There is this, I think she is an American. She's not an academic, but she looks at AI.
Okay.
And she looks at the questions of what data centers are doing in America and how they're just destroying the environment.
I think she's Chinese.
Yes, that's her. It's her. So it's the key question of saying, what will that mean for a continent where people want our water, and you bring, but they'll say, here's an AI center.
You are starting a whole other conversation for another day.
So,
because when you say that, I'm like, we currently in South Africa have a shortage of water. Our electricity is not that very stable, and we see the proliferation of data centers. What is the relationship between the scarcity of water and the number of data centers that are going up? Are these things not taking out resources already? All right. But for today, let's leave.
So that's what I'm saying. Universities, that's what a university for me is, in service of such things. And maybe the modern university in this AI thing should have been, look, if you're not in service of answering those national interest things, I don't think it deserves to be a university.
Yeah. All right. Dr. TK, thank you so much for making the time. Unfortunately, this is where we got to leave it today. But thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. It's been one I'll not forget. I took a few notes because I learned so much. But yeah, thank you so much, man. I truly appreciate your time. Stan,
thanks for having me. And sometimes I say in African culture, it's the question that is sometimes more important than the nonsense we sprouted. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That has been the Angle Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do like, subscribe, and share on all social media platforms. There are links to the papers that we made mention of will be in the description box below. Thank you so much.